I thought it was going to be one of those family events I would forget by the next morning. My wife, Emily, had spent the entire week helping her younger sister, Rachel, prepare for her engagement party. The backyard of my father-in-law's beautiful home outside Columbus, Ohio, looked like something from a magazine. White lights hung between tall oak trees, soft music played through hidden speakers. Friends laughed around tables covered with flowers. I had only one job: keep my 8-year-old son, Noah, entertained. That sounded easy enough. Noah chased other kids across the lawn while I carried 2 glasses of lemonade back toward Emily. My father-in-law, Richard, stood near the patio, talking with several business partners. He owned a successful construction company and loved reminding everyone how hard he had worked to build it. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Around sunset, I noticed my next-door neighbor, Mike Lawson, arrive. Mike wasn't family. Richard had invited him because they served together on a local charity board. Most people only knew Mike as a friendly neighbor who enjoyed grilling every weekend. I knew something different. Mike had been a police detective for nearly 20 years. Although he was off duty tonight, old habits never left him. He rarely missed anything. When he walked into the backyard, his smile lasted only a few seconds. His eyes immediately began scanning people instead. He wasn't looking for conversation. He was looking for something else. I shrugged it off. Old detectives probably couldn't stop being detectives. The party continued. Rachel showed everyone her diamond ring while guests applauded. Emily hugged her sister with tears in her eyes. Richard proudly raised a glass. To family, he announced. Everyone cheered. Everyone except Mike. He stood near the edge of the yard, watching the house instead of the celebration. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. About 30 minutes later, Noah ran over holding a soccer ball. Dad, can we play in the front yard? Sure. We walked around the side of the house. The front yard was quiet, no music, no laughter, just warm summer air, and the sound of crickets beginning to sing. Noah kicked the ball toward me. I kicked it back. For 5 peaceful minutes, I forgot about everything else. Then Mike appeared. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face looked pale. His voice was barely louder than a whisper. He grabbed my arm hard enough to make me stop. Don't ask questions, he said. His eyes locked onto mine. Get your son. I laughed nervously. What? Get your son? His voice became sharper. We're leaving. Right now. Every instinct told me something was terribly wrong. I called Noah. He ran over, confused. Mike walked us quickly toward his truck, parked across the street. What happened? No. Time. Did someone get hurt? No. Then what's going on? Mike looked over his shoulder toward the house. Just keep walking. I wanted to argue. Emily was still inside. The rest of my family was still inside. Leaving without saying anything felt impossible, but something in Mike's expression stopped me. I had never seen that look before. It wasn't fear. It was certainty. 20 minutes later, we were driving along a quiet county road. No one spoke. Noah had fallen asleep in the back seat. Finally, Mike pulled into an empty parking lot beside an old baseball field. He turned off the engine. Silence. Then, he looked directly at me. I need to ask you something. Fine. When Richard went into his office tonight, I nodded. Did you happen to see what was sitting on his desk? I frowned. No. Mike stared at me for several seconds. Then he slowly shook his head. I was afraid you'd say that. A cold chill ran through my body. What are you talking about? He leaned back in his seat. There was a file on Richard's desk, so it had your name on it. My heart skipped a beat. My name. And Noah's. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mike continued. I wasn't trying to snoop. Richard left the office door open while he answered a phone call. I happened to glance inside. He paused. The folder wasn't labeled like normal business paperwork. What did it say? Mike answered quietly. Emergency custody transfer. My hands began shaking. That's impossible. I wish it was. I stared through the windshield. Nothing made sense anymore. Why would my father-in-law have legal papers with my son's name? Why hadn't Emily mentioned anything? Why had Mike risked dragging me away from a family celebration? And most important, what was about to happen if we had stayed? I sat frozen in Mike's truck, staring through the windshield as my mind tried to catch up with what he had just said. An emergency custody transfer, my name. My son's name. None of it made any sense. There has to be some mistake, I finally whispered. Mike didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the sleeping Noah in the back seat before speaking. I hope there is. I rubbed my face with both hands. My wife would never keep something like that from me. I don't know your wife, Mike replied carefully, but I do know people sometimes hide things when they're under pressure. Those words stayed with me. Emily and I had been married for 10 years. We had survived job losses, medical bills, and long nights with a newborn who refused to sleep. We trusted each other. At least, I thought we did. I pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls, all from Emily. A dozen text messages followed. Where are you? Everyone is looking for you. Please answer. Datri's dad is furious. The last message caught my attention. Don't come back yet. I'll explain later. My stomach tightened. Later. Explain what? I called her immediately. The phone rang twice before she answered. Her voice sounded shaky. Where are you? I should be asking you that, I said. Mike pulled Noah and me out of the party. A silence. Then she quietly asked, You're with Mike? Les. Another long silence. Emily, I said slowly. What's going on? She stopped herself. I can't explain over the phone. My heart pounded harder. You have 30 seconds before I drive back there. No. She almost shouted, Please don't. That single word changed everything. Emily never panicked. She was the calm one in our marriage, the woman who could handle emergencies without raising her voice. But tonight, she sounded terrified. I need you to trust me. I do trust you. No. Her voice cracked. I need you to trust me for just 1 more hour. 1 more hour? Why aren't you telling me? I'll meet you. Where? She hesitated. Riverside Park. Come alone. The call ended. I looked at Mike. He had heard enough to understand. We'll wait. 45 minutes later, Emily's SUV pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. She stepped out alone. Her makeup was smeared from crying. The confident woman I knew looked exhausted. Before I could speak, she hugged Noah, who had just woken up. Then she turned toward me. I'm sorry. For what? For not telling you sooner. My chest tightened. There is something. She nodded. Yes. Mike quietly walked a few steps away, giving us privacy while still watching the surroundings like the detective he had always been. Emily took a deep breath. My father has been planning something for months. What? He believes Noah should inherit everything. I blinked. Isn't that good? She shook her head. Not the way he wants it. She explained that Richard had recently learned he had an aggressive heart condition. His doctors expected him to live only another year or 2. Instead of telling the family, he secretly met with attorneys. He became obsessed with protecting his fortune. Millions of dollars, commercial properties, land, investments. He trusted almost no one, especially me. He thinks you'll lose everything if you ever start another business. I laughed bitterly. My failed restaurant? Emily nodded. Never forgave you. 7 years earlier, I had opened a small family restaurant. It failed after 18 months. We lost nearly everything. We rebuilt our lives from scratch. Apparently, Richard never forgot. So what does that have to do with Noah? Emily looked down. He believes Noah should be raised under his control. My stomach turned. What? He told his lawyers that if anything happened to him, Noah should live on the family estate until he became an adult. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It gets worse. She reached into her purse. I copied something. She handed me several folded papers. They were legal documents. Richard's signature covered nearly every page. My eyes stopped on one sentence. The biological parents have demonstrated repeated financial instability. Tress. I stared at Emily. He actually wrote this. She nodded. There are dozens of statements like that. I kept reading. Every page painted me as irresponsible, unstable, unfit, someone who loved his son, but supposedly couldn't provide for him. It felt like reading a stranger's opinion about my own life. Then I reached the final page. There in black ink was something that made my hands shake. A signature line. Mine. Unsigned. What is this? Emily looked away. He wanted you to sign it tonight. I stared at her in disbelief. How? He planned to tell you the documents were part of Noah's college trust. The world seemed to stop. He expected me to sign away my own parental rights without reading them. Emily nodded, tears filling her eyes. I couldn't let that happen. I looked toward Mike. So that's what you saw. He nodded once. The folder was open. I couldn't read every page, but I read enough. For several minutes, none of us spoke. The only sound came from the distant traffic passing the park. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me. Emily. She looked at me. Whose idea was this? She answered so quietly I almost didn't hear it. My father's. You had nothing to do with it. I've been trying to stop him for weeks. I wanted to believe her. Part of me already did, but another part kept asking the same painful question. If she had known for weeks, why had she waited until tonight to tell me? Before I could ask, Mike's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. His expression changed instantly. What is it? I asked. He slowly lowered the phone. My friend at the sheriff's office just called. He swallowed hard. Richard reported that you kidnapped your own son. The blood drained from my face. The game had just changed. The words hit me harder than I expected. Richard reported that you kidnapped your own son. For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe. I looked at Noah, sitting quietly on a park bench, eating the granola bar Mike had given him. He had no idea that, somewhere across town, people were probably looking for me, as if I were a criminal. That's impossible, I said. Mike shook his head. It isn't. He told Dispatch that you became angry during the engagement party, grabbed Noah, and drove away before anyone could stop you. Emily covered her mouth. Oh my God, Mike continued. He also claimed your phone was turned off, and that he feared for Noah's safety. I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up. My phone has been on the whole time. I know. But that's not what was reported. I looked at Emily. Did your father really do this? Tears rolled down her cheeks. He must have. For the first time since we had met in college, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of me, fear of her own father. Mike stepped away to make another phone call. When he returned, his face looked even more serious. We don't have much time. What do you mean? Deputies have already been given your truck's description. My heart sank. They're treating this as a possible family abduction. I laughed bitterly. I didn't even drive my own truck. Mike nodded. I know. But Richard doesn't. That mistake bought us a little time. Not much. Emily reached for my hand. I gently pulled it away. I need answers. I know. No. My voice cracked. I need the truth, she nodded. I'll tell you everything. She sat beside me on the bench and took a deep breath. About 6 months ago, Dad started acting differently. Became obsessed with his legacy. He said our family had sacrificed too much to let outsiders destroy what Grandpa built. Outsiders. She looked directly at me. I meant you. The words hurt more than I expected. I had spent 10 years trying to earn Richard's respect, helping repair his rental houses, taking him to medical appointments, fixing his farm equipment every winter. Apparently, none of it mattered. Always smiled at me. Emily nodded sadly. He smiled while hiring private investigators. My stomach twisted. What? He had investigators follow you? For months, I stared at her. You knew. I found out later. What did they find? She looked embarrassed. Nothing. Because there wasn't anything to find. Mike returned. I confirmed it. He handed me a small notepad. A detective friend had texted him several case notes. Richard had hired a licensed investigation firm nearly 4 months earlier. The reports described my daily routine, where I worked, where I bought groceries, when I picked Noah up from school, how long I stayed at the gym. Someone had been watching me, every day, without my knowledge. Then, something suddenly clicked in my mind. The office. Emily looked up. What about it? When was the last time you saw those papers? This afternoon. Were they the only files on his desk? She frowned. No. There was a black notebook. Mike immediately became interested. What kind of notebook? I don't know. Dad never lets anyone touch it. He even locks it inside his desk every night. Mike looked thoughtful. If he left it out, he was interrupted. I stared at him. What are you thinking? I'm thinking your father-in-law isn't only planning a custody fight. He was preparing for something bigger. Coot. At that moment, Mike's phone rang again. He answered immediately. Lawson. He listened for nearly a minute without speaking. When the call ended, he looked directly at me. We have a problem. Another one. My friend just checked the court filings. And there aren't just custody documents. There are emergency guardianship petitions. Emily's eyes widened. No. Mike nodded. They were scheduled to be filed first thing Monday morning. Today's engagement party suddenly made perfect sense. Richard had invited nearly everyone important in the family. Business partners, friends, neighbors, church members. If I had unknowingly signed those papers tonight, everyone would have believed I agreed to them willingly. No one would question it. Richard wasn't just trying to win. He was creating witnesses. 2. I suddenly remembered something. Emily. She looked at me. Last month, your father insisted Noah spend the weekend at his lake house. She slowly nodded. He kept asking strange questions. What kind? He wanted to know Noah's favorite foods, his bedtime, the name of his doctor, even what school subjects he liked. Emily's face turned pale. I thought he was just trying to bond with him, Mike quietly said, or preparing to raise him. Silence filled the park. Noah walked over. Dad. I forced a smile. Yeah, buddy. Why is everyone sad? I knelt beside him. No one's sad. We're just figuring something out. He nodded. Then he asked the question that broke my heart. Are we still going home tonight? I looked at Emily. She looked back at me. Neither of us answered. Just then, headlights swept across the parking lot. A black SUV slowly rolled toward us. It wasn't a police vehicle. It stopped about 30 feet away. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out wearing an expensive suit. I recognized him immediately. Richard's personal attorney. He closed the door, adjusted his tie, and smiled as though nothing were wrong. Then he spoke loudly enough for all of us to hear. "Jason, Richard asked me to make you one final offer." My pulse quickened. "What offer?" The attorney held up a thick manila envelope. "Sign the papers voluntarily, and all of this goes away." The attorney stood beside the black SUV, holding the thick manila envelope, as if it contained nothing more than routine paperwork. "Never changed, Jason," he called calmly. "Richard doesn't want this to become ugly." I took one step forward. "It already is," he sighed. "I understand you're emotional." I almost laughed. Emotional? My father-in-law had reported me for kidnapping my own son, tried to trick me into signing legal documents, and now he had sent his attorney to negotiate in the middle of a dark parking lot. That wasn't emotion, that was betrayal. Mike quietly moved beside me. "I'm going to record this," he whispered. He slipped his phone into his shirt pocket with the camera facing outward. The tiny recording light stayed hidden. "Good," I whispered back. The attorney approached slowly, stopping several feet away. "My name is Daniel Brooks," he said, extending a hand. I ignored it. "What does Richard want?" Brooks lowered his hand without reacting. "He wants everyone to go home." "That's funny." I folded my arms. "Because he told the sheriff I kidnapped my own son." "That report can be corrected. If we resolve this tonight." The word "if" caught my attention. "So the kidnapping report is leverage." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Mike spoke for the first time. "Counselor, are you attempting to negotiate under a knowingly false police report?" The attorney's eyes shifted toward Mike. "And you are a concerned citizen." "I'd prefer to speak privately with Jason." Mike smiled politely. "That's not happening." The attorney studied Mike for a moment. Something in Mike's posture seemed to make him cautious. He realized he wasn't dealing with an ordinary bystander. Brooks opened the envelope and removed several documents. "Richard has authorized a generous settlement. I didn't touch the papers. You and Emily receive a mortgage-free home, a trust fund, annual payments, and you voluntarily appoint Richard as Noah's legal guardian until Noah turns 18. I stared at him. "You expect me to sell my son?" The attorney immediately corrected me. "Legally speaking, no. Morally speaking." He didn't answer. That silence was enough. Emily stepped forward. "I'm his mother." Brooks nodded. "I never agreed to this." "You don't need to." Emily frowned. "What?" Brooks looked uncomfortable for the first time. "The documents only require one parent's signature under the proposed emergency structure." Every muscle in my body tightened. He looked down. "The petition states that your marriage has become unstable." Emily gasped. "That's a lie." Brooks remained quiet. "It also states," he continued carefully, "that Jason has demonstrated unpredictable financial judgment." "I owned one failed restaurant 7 years ago." "The petition references additional concerns." "What concerns?" Brooks hesitated. Then he quietly answered. "Potential anger issues." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I've never been arrested. Never charged. Never accused of hurting anyone." "I know." He looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I'm simply explaining what's written." Mike suddenly asked a question. "Who wrote the petition?" Brooks answered without thinking. "Richard dictated most of it." "And who supplied the supporting evidence?" Brooks froze. It was only for a second, but it was enough. Mike saw it. Emily saw it. "There isn't any evidence," Mike said calmly. Brooks remained silent. Mike took another step. "Because if there were, you would have answered immediately." The attorney slowly lowered the folder. "I think this meeting is over," He turned toward his SUV. Then Mike spoke again. Daniel. The attorney stopped. I have one more question. No response. Were you aware Richard filed a false kidnapping report before you came here tonight? Brooks didn't turn around. His shoulders stiffened. Finally, he answered. I advised him not to. Then, he got into his SUV and drove away. None of us spoke until the taillights disappeared. Mike looked at me. Did you hear that? I nodded. He admitted he warned Richard. And this conversation is recorded. My eyes widened. You got everything. Mike pulled out his phone. Every word. For the first time that night, I felt hope. The next morning, we met with an attorney recommended by Mike. After watching the recording and reading Emily's copies of the custody documents, she leaned back in her chair. I've handled family law for 26 years. She paused. I've never seen anyone try something this reckless. She immediately contacted the sheriff's office. Within hours, investigators obtained the recording. They also interviewed Mike. The false kidnapping report quickly began to fall apart. Phone records proved Emily knew exactly where Noah had been. Security cameras showed I had calmly walked away from the party with my son. Several guests confirmed no argument had occurred. Richard's story unraveled piece by piece. 3 days later, detectives obtained a search warrant for Richard's office. Inside the desk, they found far more than custody paperwork. The black notebook Emily had mentioned was still there. It contained handwritten notes, dates, plans, lists of conversations, even instructions about convincing family members that I was too unstable to raise Noah. Investigators also found emails discussing ways to pressure me into signing documents without fully reading them. One sentence stood out above all the others. If Jason signs at the engagement party, everything will be finished before he realizes what happened. That single sentence changed the entire case. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a plan. A deliberate one. Richard was never arrested for wanting custody of his grandson. People are allowed to go to court, but filing false reports, presenting misleading documents, and attempting to obtain signatures through deception carried serious legal consequences. His business reputation collapsed almost overnight. Several partners withdrew from ongoing projects. Board members asked him to resign from 2 charities for a man who had spent decades protecting his image. That was the punishment he feared most. 2 months later, life finally became quiet again. Emily and I spent a long time rebuilding the trust that had been damaged. It wasn't easy, she admitted. She should have told me the truth much sooner. I admitted I had ignored too many warning signs, because I wanted to believe our family was stronger than it really was. Trust, once cracked, doesn't repair overnight. But honesty became the foundation we rebuilt on. One Saturday afternoon, Noah and I returned to the same baseball field, where everything had changed. He threw a ball into the air and caught it with a grin. Dad. Yeah, buddy. Are bad guys always strangers? I smiled sadly. No. Sometimes they're people you already know. He thought about that for a moment. Then how do you know who to trust? I looked across the empty field, remembering the night that had nearly torn our family apart. Then I smiled. You trust the people who tell you the truth, even when the truth is difficult. He nodded as if it made perfect sense. Then he ran off laughing across the grass. I watched him go, grateful that he was still free to be nothing more than a little boy. Because I learned something that summer I'll never forget. The most dangerous betrayals don't begin with enemies at the door. They begin with family members who smile while asking you to sign a piece of paper.